stuff hands-on. To start the afternoon off, we're going to have Mitch Kieffer. He's a producer profile on making quality hay. And Mitch's background. Mitchell Kieffer owns and operates Balmoral Farms near Teeswater, Ontario, in partnership with his parents. Balmoral Farms is a dairy operation milking 70 cows and farming 300 acres. Crops grown on the farm include corn, alfalfa, oats, peas, and wheat, mainly for feed. Mitchell graduated from the University of Guelph with a degree in agricultural economics in 2011 and has been on the farm full-time since. Mitchell lives on the farm with his wife and 2 young boys. Please welcome Mitchell to the stage.
Well, hi. Thanks for the introduction there. I guess it's thanks for the opportunity to speak here. I'm going to kind of just try and give a sort of a farmer perspective. It might not be as technical and scientific as some of our earlier presentators, but we'll kind of go and hopefully get some small things you can do on the farm and just take home right away, apply, and hopefully help you to take steps to make some quality forages. I realize at points it might be kind of a review to some of you, as obviously a room full of people attending a forage conference are probably already making quality forages. However, I know in my experiences, sometimes just hearing what other people are doing or drilling home these points over and over, they kind of sink in, and you really can make some differences that way. So just, I guess that was kind of touched on in my bio, just my introduction, and we'll kind of get into things here. That's just a quick picture of the farm, as well as my helpers. So, overview, I'm just going to kind of break it into a few steps here, just right from when you start, you take the crop off and store it kind of thing. So we have pre-plant, planting, harvesting, storage, post-harvest, and just kind of challenges that are faced. In pre-plant, I know on our farm, I'm a big believer in soil sampling. You know, obviously resources, especially when you're buying them, are expensive. So you want to know what you need, what you don't need, and what amounts kind of thing, so you can make the best use of those resources. When you're selecting varieties, there's lots of good varieties out there, but you really need to know what your goals are on your farm. You know, there's a wide array of things, whether you're big into overall yield or whether you're a little more concerned about quality. You kind of have to know what you want, and then when you're dealing with a salesperson, you know, find someone who understands your goals, and you can hopefully find something that's going to work. And finally, just be ready to plant when conditions are right. So that's as simple as just, you know, obviously making sure the seed's at the farm, or if you're planting or whatnot, you know, do the proper maintenance on all your equipment so you're ready to go. Because when, you know, the weather turns, you don't want to be sitting around fixing something you should have fixed a while ago, because, you know, you don't get those days back. Into planting, you want to make sure your fields are obviously in good conditions to plant, and if you are applying either manure or fertilizer there, you want to make sure it's ready to go and you have the best seed bed for your crop. Also, what I find is real important is know your planting rate and to check often. Like, I'm as guilty as anyone else. When it finally turns and it's time to go, you know, I want to hop in the tractor and just drive all day, but it's important, you know, every time, say, you have to refill, you know, get out, check, you know, is it working the whole length across your planter, and is it going on like you think it should be going on? Because, I mean, if you miss that step, you know, you can really lower your yield potential for that crop. Moving into harvesting, this is when it really starts to get important. I think it's really important to have an aggressive cutting schedule. You know, aim for that 4 to 5 cuts based on where you are, what kind of weather you have. So for me, I'm more in that 4 range. It's, you around that 5 weeks, you really got to be ready to go. It's very important to make cutting and harvesting a priority. I know we're all busy, and sometimes, you're not done planting the crop, or later in the year, you're maybe combining, or you're trying to harvest corn at the same time. But, we have such short windows when the hay's at their highest quality that you really have to stop and make it a priority. And obviously, you want to harvest in a timely manner, aim to get all your moistures right, and make sure your equipment's working right. Now, this goes across any kind of hay product you're doing. If you're doing chopped hay and forages and whatnot, everyone has their own little differences on cutting length, but it's really important to make sure you're getting that cutting length to your desired length, as well as you're getting a good uniform cut. If, the harvester isn't working properly, stop and deal with that issue at the time. Don't just keep driving on forward. Also, if you're applying, say, an acid or inoculant, make sure those things are calibrated, they're working properly, because you only get that one chance to make sure you're either preserving or aiding in the fermentation process later on. Moving into storage. In my farm, we're still in upright silos, but it works across any storage for fermented feed. You want to get it leveled off, covered up as quick as possible, get that air out of there, and get the fermentation process started. I also do a lot of wrapped hay, and what I find with that is I have a little area where I can wrap hay, kind of going uphill, because at the end of the day, you want to keep things as tight as possible and get them wrapped as quick as possible to, again, get that fermentation process going. And finally, when you're doing dry hay, I think it's really important to get that dry hay off the field so that field can get started growing again. You don't want to be leaving it a week and then you're trampling any regrowth. So, moving into post-harvest, this is when you should probably be evaluating whether you need to feed the plants. I know on our farm, we try and get out there as quick as possible before it regrows and get a light coat of manure on. I think as long as you're not overdoing it and getting a nice uniform coverage of the field, it can really be beneficial. Also, if manure is an option, you have to weigh your balances, and maybe sometimes you do have to apply some commercial fertilizer, but that'll tie into your soil samples and basically just the results you're getting off the field that time. And finally, scout for issues. I know we've covered some of them earlier on, but I don't know, you can learn a lot if you hop on your quad or in your truck and just go for a drive after it starts to regrow and, have a look at things. Don't just put your head down and think it's all fine. Moving into challenges, I've kind of touched briefly on all those throughout, but, timing's the big one. The crop is at its highest quality for, there's that short window, and it's real critical you get out there when you can and try and cut and harvest the hay at that point. To cut or not to cut, this can be either at the start of the year, maybe it's too wet to get there, or later on in the year when it's a drought condition and the hay's kind of stunted, maybe you're better just to cut it and restart and hope for better luck next time. Or even into the fall period when you have to weigh that balance of, do I need feed or should I leave this and not put it at risk over winter. And then finally, weather, that's something, you can do all these other steps along the way, and we're still at the mercy of the weather. So you try and set yourself up for the best conditions and just deal with the weather as it comes. And then finally, you have to evaluate. It's human nature. We can all sit here and boast on our accomplishments or things that went well. It's a little tougher sometimes to look back over the year and say, what worked, why it didn't work, rather than just keep doing the same thing over and over. Maybe go and look what you can change in a future year and try and have a little better success that way. So just to quickly wrap up and drive home some of the most important points, I think, select your proper varieties, know what you want out of your crop. Make sure you're correctly planting it and getting it on the field. Be aggressive with cutting and harvesting. feed the crop, evaluate your successes and failures, and at the end of the day, it's just attention to detail. You know, it might not seem like much at the time, but you know, it's a little thing here, a little thing there, and it all adds up at the end of the year to actually make, you know, a substantial difference. So with that, I'd just like to wrap up. Congratulate the Forage Council on putting on a nice day, and if there's any questions, feel free to fire away.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question, maybe you could comment on the difficulty with fresh forages. Do you ever feed fresh forages, and how do you manage that?
On our farm, I do have enough storage, and I make use of ag bags for that. So I have enough silos that I'm always feeding a fermented haylage. So I just I fill one, have the other one going so that it is fermented. And then with corn silage, I always have a bag left over from the previous year, so I can feed, you know, 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks before I have to go into green feed. So it's yeah, like having the proper storage in whatever way you can will, you know, it's just another one of those small little steps that make a big difference. You might not notice it at the time, but you look back over the course of the year and you can see like it did make a big difference. So it's something like that.
Just wondering if you want to comment on what kind of mixes you use of grass and legumes and what type of crops you grow?
As far as forage crops, I'll usually go with a 90-10 alfalfa and grass, with 90% alfalfa. I just find that, like when you're cutting that off, then you can really get some really nice protein numbers out of there. And, you know, sometimes I do sacrifice a bit of yield that way. However, if I'm putting away the quality forages with good numbers, I think for me on my farm, that definitely pays dividends. And then as far as other forages, it's just mainly corn silage and then ground corn kind of mixed in kind of thing.
Hey Mitch, you got a question here from the folks up in Earlton. Are you using straw in your TMR?
Yep, I use straw. I have a custom guy that'll come in and, I don't know, he has a big tub grinder thing, so I'm getting it really ground up nice and it mixes in well in my TMR mix, yes.
Hi, could you comment on your forages for your dry cow program?
So my dry cow program consists of, it's a corn silage as well as a straw mix. And then there's a kind of a mineral supplement pack that's mixed into that. So there's only a very small amount of haylage in that mix, and it's just used to kind of bind all the fines in with everything else. But I've been on that for, I don't know, like probably more than 5 years, and it works really well.
What are your views on corn silage varieties?
As far as
Types of silage varieties, types of corn varieties?
when I'm growing corn silage, I like to aim for really high starch numbers. So I'm willing to sacrifice overall, I guess, plant height and mass if I can really get a higher starch number. So when I'm growing corn, I like a plant that's probably a little shorter or maybe more fine stemmed. And then I know it kind of contradicts some of the things we heard earlier, but I really push the heat units to kind of get some of the varieties that are going to give me that bigger cob and give me some higher starch numbers.
Hey, Mitch. Question from out New Brunswick way. What species of grass is in with your alfalfa?
It's a Timothy.
questions? Let's give him a round of applause, please. At this time, we'd like to bring Joe Lawrence back.